Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the Second Button Podcast. This is season 3, episode 5 on Netflix and on the DVD.
Okay, so it matched up.
It
I like
matched up. This one's called The Library. This is a very classic episode.
Very good episode.
And when they wrote the episode, they were inspired by Dragnet.
Okay, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, they were,
a character, not like it's going to fucking spoil anything. Bookman is very Dragnet-y.
Yeah, and that's what he said. They said they wanted to drag it into a sitcom and see how it worked. And it
very
worked.
Joe Friday. I like that. So, anyways, getting into it. Starts off with a stand-up bit about ventriloquist dummy, like kind of a riff that Jerry's going. Not really so much of a joke, just him kind of talking about, the
it's not really funny.
Dummies. Yeah.
Not really funny. He's just talking.
Yeah. And he's like, oh yeah. You ever notice how these, ventriloquist dummies have a very active sexual social life? Like bringing them back to the suitcase, lots of sawdust jokes and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, I guess I luckily haven't seen many ventriloquist performers or comedians. No. It seems like a talent for sure, just not one that I'm impressed with.
Or a talent that I don't care for.
Yeah, or want to see. It makes you sound like a dickhead, but you know what I mean?
It's like Jeff Dunham, the one that had the 15 different guys, and he's on his dick.
Yeah.
That was entertaining, but once, not. I wouldn't be oh, Jeff's in town again. Let's go check it out.
And then other people would say how he's racist because it was caricatures of I think a jalapeno on a stick, and he did a Hispanic voice, and then a skeleton with a turban on, and people were like, okay. But he got famous. He made money.
He got canceled before being canceled was the thing.
Yeah. That was it. It was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And now people can pull that out. You remember this? I'm like, I don't think he's even really a thing anymore. But remember that he's Bad Man. Remember Bad Man? And I'm like, okay.
Remember when Kramer was at the Laugh Shack?
Yeah. That was my favorite stand-up performance.
Jesus.
I like Dave Chappelle talking about that.
Yeah.
Where he's all like, I understand. As a comedian, I was right there with him. I'm like, they had it coming. But as a black man, I was like, you can't say that, Kramer. Yeah. But then again, as a comedian, I'm like, you'll get him next set, Kramer. It's but there was no next set.
No,
it was pretty good.
That was it.
But yeah, it's with a ventriloquist, the whole not moving the mouth thing while talking or whatever. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's good. It's a talent for sure, like I said, but it's reminds me of a banjo player or an accordionist. Really, they could be fucking ripping it, really, really good at the instrument, and I don't need to ever see it or hear it. Could you imagine just a singer-songwriter that their instrument is a banjo?
Yeah.
Or an accordion, Urkel style. I'm like, I don't need to fucking see this. But yeah. Anyways, I'm just shitting on dummies. We're already, or ventriloquists, whatever. Anyway, so it moves on. So that was kind of a weird opening because it has nothing to do with the episode.
No.
I feel at a certain point they were getting more in line with the episode and jokes, commingling and going together.
It's season 1 where it didn't match up. But.
Yeah, it was just here's a routine here.
Mm-hmm.
But it opens up at Jerry's apartment. He's on the phone. He's talking to the library about an overdue book from 1971. He acts like it's a gag. He's like, okay, you got me, kind of thing. Is it a radio station?
Yeah.
Funny prank call. You got me, but it's actually legit. And then, just so you know, kind of thing. Those prank calls and shit that you hear on radio stations aren't real. Not at all.
Never?
They're laws that they can't do that.
Oh, really?
And they hire actors and a lot of times comedians to do that. So kind of they just these comedians can riff or whatever. Dates that went wrong or, War of the Roses kind of thing of hey, we're going to call your boyfriend up and to see if he's cheating, we'll give him a dozen roses and expensive candy. We'll pretend hey, you won this. Send it to whoever. And that way they would send it to like their girlfriend or somebody they're cheating on them with. Let's check it out.
Yeah, it's all set up.
It's all fake. Yeah.
Fuck.
So it's like
that kind of ruins life for me. So if that ruined anyone's image of comedy on radio, rewind this by 2 minutes and then skip by 2 minutes so you don't hear that piece.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, because on Come Town and Matt and Shane, when they were first starting out, because they're like New York and Philly and stuff like that, they're kind of, starting out comedians. They're like, hey, for $20, do you want to do this like bit? It's at noon on the radio. Just like pick up the phone and we'll call you. And you play, you're the boyfriend. You just act like you're dumb and like, what? I didn't cheat on you. And then Shane's like, I'm eating, a can of chunky soup, but I can't fucking do that. I'm sleeping on a mattress on the floor with like 8 other comedians in this house. Like, I can't do that shit. So even back then, he had integrity. Yeah. And then like Come Town, the same thing. It was like Stav and even Nick. He was like, we got offered to do these things. I just can't do it. He's like, it's fucking like, that's so cheesy.
You realize what you just said?
Yeah. They're on a podcast
even
called Come Town.
Even back then, he had integrity. Anyway, on Come Town.
Yeah. Nick Mullen. But, and I would kind of like, I'm like, I always thought they were kind of cheesy. And then when they said that, I'm like, oh, yeah, I think there's certain laws with whatever that they can't do prank calls like that. But they still like, let's push the bit. So anyways, not to, Santa Claus, yeah.
What do you mean?
What? It'd be great if your wife still she makes gifts for you. It's like from Santa. You're like, I was a good boy this year. Yeah. I hope it's something good.
How did he know?
Yeah. So, anyways, they're after he gets off the phone, Kramer comes in. He's wants to know what's going on. What was that about? And he talks about the overdue library book from 1971. And then Kramer's like, that's a nickel a day for 20 years. That could be $50,000. What if it was a dime a day? That's $100,000.
Okay, so that bothered me. That really bothered me. I was like, that doesn't line up. So nickel a day.
Yeah.
So if you had a nickel for January 1st of every year for 20 years, that'd be 5 cents times 20. So that's $1. So 20 years worth of a nickel a day is $365 plus a quarter for each for the leap years. So $365.25. That's not $50,000, Kramer.
It's not $100,000 either.
No, it's $365.
But yeah, it's just funny. So
it was still funny.
He, Jerry says, he's not going to pay anything because he remembers returning the book. It was remembers very vividly. He returned it when he was with Sherry Becker. She wore an orange dress, and then she was developing this body in secret under these loose clothes. And one day, this orange dress, it's burned in my memory. Kramer, ooh, memory burn. Kramer, that's all he had to hear, and he's all about it. He's a horn dog. He talks about how it's like they must be cracking down on the overdue books, because of a new computer system, whatever. So that's probably how they found him. So he's got to go down to the library and straighten shit out. And then Kramer just casually pulls out a TV guide and talks like he's above having a library card and the cheapskates that go to the library, just reading newspapers attached to those wooden sticks, trying to save a quarter. And then Kramer, or Jerry, he's like, tells Kramer he's got to leave, and he asks Kramer, "Was like, oh, do you want to come to the library?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I'll go." He's all excited to go, like he's a dog. He's the guy that read the newspaper on a stick. He's got nothing to do. He's just like reading a TV guide. He's like, oh, these dumb morons. I'm above them. Like, you want to go to the library? Yeah, no, I'll go. Yeah. It's like, let's go on an adventure. I got nothing going on. So you want to go for a walk, boy? You want to go for a walk? Yeah. Yeah. It's like even thinking about it, I haven't been to a library since I was a kid. Like before even high school. I'm like, I hadn't seen a need for it. Like even in high school, any research that had to be done could be online or at the school library if you needed to check out a book.
I was young.
Yeah.
We still needed encyclopedias. But then, like grade 10, the internet came around. We had like Windows 3.1. And you could find some stuff, but it's still quicker to use a book.
Mm-hmm.
But I went to the library to get novels. And I was about to read my Star Wars novels because I couldn't afford to buy them.
Yeah.
But I was in the library recently. I went to get blood work in the same building. Like it's a community-run place. Yeah. And I gave the blood, and across the hall was a library. So I walked through, and I was like, what do you do here? Take out a book? It just felt weird because now I can afford to buy books. And I have a whole bunch of books over here.
Yeah.
And I bought them all and only read half them so far.
Now I can afford to buy the books and not read them.
Yeah, I can't afford to read them.
I don't have the time to read them. But yeah, I just remember, a certain point not ever needing to go to a library. And then, I guess nowadays they have like computers, with internet access and, printers and stuff like that from what I've heard. Again, this is all just hearsay, what the word on the street is. And even they have DVDs that you can borrow / rent or whatever. Mm-hmm. But even that seems outdated because fewer things you need printed.
Yeah.
I would say.
Here, they passed out COVID swabs. That's how the government dispersed them. Mm-hmm. And they have like walking poles and like snowshoes and stuff at the library. I'm not sure when that started, but I heard it's a thing that if you want some snowshoes, you can go borrow them from.
I guess the last time I went to the library is when I went to go vote.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is the place.
There's books.
Bye now.
Where's that National Geographic?
Yeah. I'm 34 years old. I'm like, oh man, I think I'm a fucking jack off. Can I say that to the library?
Joseph would work with this 200 friggin' National Geographic.
That's what he's always. He's just on the hunt looking for some of those. Yeah. But yeah, and maybe I just sound like better than thou, but I just don't see a real need for a library for me. In my life.
Me, yeah.
The joke is that, and not. I'm like, I was like, maybe not going to make this joke, but it's just like that's a place for people who are experiencing homelessness to hang out, and it gets into in this episode.
It does. It does.
But anyways, so the guys, they're at the library, and Kramer, he's just pulling for shit to bitch about the library. He's like mentions the Dewey Decimal System, and what a scam that was. That Dewey guy really cleaned up on that one. He got me thinking, like, what is the Dewey Decimal System and how is it a scam? And so I Googled it. So this is a quick little the Dewey Decimal Classification, colloquially known as Dewey Decimal System, is a proprietary library classification system which allows new books to be added to a library in their appropriate location based on subject. How is that a scam? Who is getting scammed? And out of what?
The library really spent money on that.
It's just like, who's getting fucked over? Like, we need to organize these books. And Kramer's like, not bloody likely.
Don't organize my book.
Yeah. So I had mentioned that the guys are there because George was coming with them. But Kramer and Jerry, they're in the library, but they're Georgeless. That'll come up later, where he is. So they're waiting for help at the front desk of the library. A librarian has her back turned towards the guys, and is she has a stack of books and she's stamping them, and then she's totally ignoring Jerry. It's not related, but kind of. But it reminds me of like when you're at a bar, and the bartender is just completely ignoring you. There's nobody fucking else there. Like there could be like very few people, so it's not like it's like a super busy night. I'm fuck. Yeah. Like, okay. Like one, like the other night, I'm like at like a dive bar, and then there's no one else, at the bar part waiting to get served. The guy has his back completely turned towards me. I'm like, so I kind of move at an angle, like, hey, I can be in his peripheral. And he's just playing fucking Candy Crush. that like his phone is illuminating his dumb fucking face. I'm like, I'm like, fuck, man.
You can see the candy in his glasses. You're like, you're playing Candy Crush.
Just mouth is just swiping around on his finger. Next he's gonna go to Tinder, just so I can swipe right. But I'm like, anyways, not really related. But I'm like, man, hardest job in the world, bartender.
Yeah.
Anyways, what are we talking about?
It would Seinfeld, I
think. It would be just like, I'm just fucking, you get my hated. Anyways, so so they're right there within earshot of the librarian, and Kramer's just gawking at her. Like,
and going on like highly inappropriately.
Yeah, he's like, oh, she's a lonely woman looking for companionship, a spinster, a virgin. She needs a little tenderness, a little understanding. She needs a little Kramer.
I want a shirt that says, need a little Kramer.
She needs a little Kramer. And I'm like, oh my God. And then Jerry's like, oh, and then she'll need a little, she'll need a shot of penicillin. And then
that's got to be the riskiest joke they've done so far.
Yeah.
It's kind of up there for Seinfeld.
Yeah, just she's a virgin. I'm like, good God. So Jerry gives her the notice that he got, about overdue, book. And then she says this case has been turned over to the library investigator, Mr. Bookman. And then Kramer's like kind of off to the side. He's blown away that the guy's name is Bookman.
Yeah.
He's like, that's like an ice cream man named Cone.
We had a cardiac surgeon named Dr. Hack. and then we have a urologist. His name is Dr. Ram. And we have a cardiologist named Dr. Love.
Damn.
So I was working the other day, and a doctor called me, and I always ask him to spell their last name when the doctor's calling, so I get it right. He says, my name's Dr. Kiss. I'm like, how would you spell that? Like, I'm just thinking, how would you spell? Like, was it K-I-S-T or K, Yes, it's K-I-S-S. I'm like, oh, Dr. Kiss, just like it sounds. I said, there's a Dr. Love in Halifax. You guys should start a band. Because Dr. Love is a Kiss song.
Yeah.
And he goes, good. I heard about that. And then kept going on whatever medical emergency he wanted to talk to me about. I was like, I'm trying to make jokes here.
No. You don't understand this joke that I have here?
Like, enough talking about the sickie. Did you hear my joke?
Yeah.
Rewind a little bit.
Like, did it land? You need to clear your ears out. Yeah.
Anyway, so it's funny when you find people with names like that match their job.
Yeah. It's like, What I think is funny about this is like neither her or Jerry give a shit. They're just like, and that's what makes it funnier that Kramer's just like, does anybody get this? Hello. So she leaves to go get Mr. Bookman, and then George enters the scene with a look of shock, like he's seen a ghost, maybe a blast from the past. So he tells Jerry that it's him. He saw him, and then they're like, who's him? He's like, the homeless guy in front of the library is Mr. Heyman, the former gym teacher from their high school. And then Jerry, it's like, oh, George got him fired. He squealed on him. And then Kramer, ooh, a tattletale. Like all throughout this scene, it's funny too. I didn't mention that they're in the library and they're talking and they keep getting shushed by some dingus reading a newspaper
on, stick.
On one of the sticks.
On his dick. That Jeff Dunham bit's really coming through this episode.
Yeah.
Newspaper on his dick.
See, I barely remember any of his bits, but I like it. Yeah. You got the Jeff Dunham commentary over there. Yeah. So, and then Kramer, they pull off to the side. Like, that's really going to keep the situation quiet. The Kramer asks, like, what the guy did to, get George to, squeal. And then, he's like, oh, he doesn't want to say. And then Kramer pries and he hopes to hear it later. I think just to be nosy. It has nothing to do with anything. Kramer just like, well, I'm here at the library. Let's make the most of this trip.
Yeah.
Let's hear some gossip. So she comes back and Bookman isn't there. He's out on a case. And then Kramer's like, he actually goes out on cases?
He's so amazed.
Yeah. They, like, okay, well, he'll contact you later. and they leave, and then Kramer decides to stick around, and he's he wants to see what a guy has got to do to get a library card around here.
He's like, I'll see you boys later.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty smooth line.
It didn't work. It didn't look like it worked. It didn't look like
no,
it worked.
it did not, because her face looked like she was just like annoyed.
Yeah.
Like, I'm here to stamp books, not to talk to your ass. Anyways, then it goes to Elaine's office.
First time we saw Elaine's office.
Yeah.
And first time we saw the fake Lippman.
Yeah. Pendant Publishing. And she's, so she, looks like she's like kind of poking around in different cubicles, and she asks the front receptionist where Karen is. It's like, oh, she wants to go pick up lunch. And then Elaine's like, well, she didn't ask if I wanted anything. It's like, maybe she forgot. Just kind of like, I don't really care about this situation, the front receptionist.
She's getting my food, that's all I care about.
Yeah. I'm getting my sandwich or whatever.
Yeah.
So she starts like just swirling, just crab swirling. Like, she's just like, well, I mean, I've ordered lunch with her for 3.5 years. Like, am I getting fired? Like, and she's just like, what? Just jumping to conclusions. Like, is Lippman firing me? You can tell me. And then Mr. Lippman comes out just to get a splash of water from the, water cooler there.
Yeah, just a little bit of water again.
Like, and Elaine asks if he saw her latest work. And he just says, yes, I did. Doesn't comment further, and he just walks away.
But for you, was Lippman, or was it a different actor playing Lippman for you?
It was a different
guy. I was wondering if they've changed that for later on.
Mm-hmm.
But
maybe, yeah, I think it's probably thought of as like, oh, this guy's not going to come up again. Who knows?
Yeah.
But he doesn't comment on Elaine's question and work. He comments on the water being too cold. And then, which it's weird. So this is a weird side story, or like B story, whatever, B plot. Like, it's the weakest part of the episode, I'll say.
Yeah.
It could have not been there, and it wouldn't change a damn thing.
They do tie it in good at the end, but
it doesn't save it for me.
It was kind of forced tied in. It wasn't natural. Yeah.
And then, well, it's like they had to just shove Elaine in the episode somewhere.
Yeah.
It's like, I guess it would be weird not to have her in an episode, but I feel like they've done that before, and they do it in the future episode.
I feel like when they didn't put Kramer in an episode, he got upset. And when they didn't put George in an episode, he threatened to quit. So I think when they got to this point, they're like, everyone has to be in every episode. So
yeah, the four main characters are all important.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, at this point, especially in season 3, they all have made their voice and characters solidified. So you had to put them somewhere. Mm-hmm. It just, anyways, it to me, it just, like, we'll get to it, but it's just like the weakest. It's like, okay, who fucking gives a shit about this? There's no consequence. Anyways, so it goes back to Monks, and Elaine's talking about her boss and how he doesn't like any of her work, and the whole lunch thing is a big deal. Jerry doesn't really get the whole office politics kind of deal with lunch in her situation, and so she reaches to George like, oh, you had to have my back because you worked in an office, and you know the importance of lunch. And then George is like, I don't know. He blows her off and he's like, I don't understand lunch. I don't know anything about lunch. So and then he's just basically like me of like this. Anyways, back to George.
Yeah.
that was it. It's like,
scene.
okay,
continue.
This
on.
is boring. Who gives a shit? And then he goes to like, okay, he talks about his own problem with Heyman. Because George got him fired, but he's like, that doesn't really mean I'm responsible for turning him into a bum.
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
Could have got another job.
Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, nowadays they're not bums or homeless really anymore. They are people experiencing temporary homelessness. George, you're canceled.
I declare you canceled.
You are canceled, Jason Alexander. But anyways, I just think it's funny. Anyway,
we'll have to post this episode on Twitter and tag him in it. Join us while we cancel Jason Alexander.
I just need to go back into like Tone Jerk's episode. No, Brian, you're canceled.
He'd be like, see that logo of yours? I'm taking it. You're done.
Yeah. You're done. Anyway, so Elaine asks, like, okay, because she's like, okay, nobody's going to do on my lunch thing, so let's talk about this. So what did the guy do to get fired? And then he's talking about like, oh, the guy had it out for me. He always mispronounced my name. Can't stand you.
This is something that comes up in my mind at least once a week.
Yeah, can't stand you. Or he says he purposely mispronounced my name. Can't stand you. And then I watch with subtitles on, and I've always said purposefully, kind of, not purposely. And I was like, of course I'm right.
It does say purposely on the script too. It says purposely.
It is purposely. That's what he says. Yeah. So I had to look it up, and they're both basically the same thing, by the way.
Okay, so we're not wrong. We're just wrong in this situation.
Purposefully is with greater intent and deliberate aim as opposed to purposely. So I think more powerful word. So Super Saiyan 2 version of purposely. So anyways, so that's just me. I got to stop and I'm like, I'm going to look this up. So anyway, so they go on about how the guy would pick on George and made him smell his own gym socks, made him wear a jock strap on his head the whole class. And Jerry mentioned how he had hygiene with the guy, hygiene class, and his teeth were like from an exhumed corpse. They came from an exhumed corpse, like little baked beans. And that was the guy who taught hygiene, which is pretty good. And he goes into the last straw, the firing incident. So it goes to a flashback scene. So in the locker room, George has an afro, gym class. He's in the locker room, and Heyman and 3 other dudes come up to George.
Ashley brought up he was very much like Leonard on Big Bang Theory in this scene. Just kind of that nerdy.
Yeah, just a nerdy George with a big afro. He's like, comes up to George. He's like, saw your underwear sticking out of your gym shorts in class. He's like, oh, that's because I wear boxer shorts. Oh, yeah? What brand? He's like, oh, I don't know. And then let's find out. So then they wedgie him, and then it shows him laughing maniacally. That's what the subtitle says. And then he got fired the next day.
So,
and they explain
things you would get fired for today.
Yeah.
At work, we used to work like 72-hour shifts.
Yeah.
So we had bunk beds. And I worked with one guy that was about 100 pounds, and another guy was over 300 pounds. And the smaller guy was nervous and timid. And he was going on the top bunk one day, and the 300-pound guy goes, what color underwear are you wearing? He's like, oh, I don't know. And he goes, mine are blue. And he had a spare pair of clean underwear in a skip bed. And he threw them up and over the bunk bed on the guy's face. And that guy slept with his pants on for the rest of his time that he was at our base. He would not take his pants off. But just a big 300-pound man underwear hitting you right in the face.
That's pretty good. I like that. Right in the kisser.
Pow, right in the kisser.
But it goes on about how he got fired the next day. And then they explain, she's like, Elaine's like, what's a wedgie? And so they explain what a wedgie is. It's like, oh, when you pull the underwear and it wedges in between. He's like, oh, God. And then there's the atomic wedgie. The goal with that one is to pull the band all the way above the person's head. And Elaine's like, boys are gross. It's like, well, what do girls do? It's like, oh, we just bully each other until they develop an eating disorder.
Kids are fucking terrible, man.
Kids are terrible.
And they still are. Kids are awful. Not all kids, but there is, kids are pretty fucking mean.
He says, kids can be so cruel.
I crawl on my desk and start crying.
It's like The Simpsons, like Marge is talking to Homer. It's like, kids can be so cruel. And Bart walks by, we can? And he goes and just tortures his sister. Bart! Off screen.
In grade 10, I fit inside one of those half lockers.
Oh.
And I did not find out on my own.
Oh, no. Yeah, that sucks. But let's see. Oh, Kramer, swings by Monk's just to let Jerry know that Bookman's waiting for him at the apartment.
Yeah.
So it cuts to a stand-up bit about libraries, and libraries are like a pathetic friend. You can just borrow stuff from them, and then they were like, hey, you can borrow my stuff, and just as long as you're my friend, and then you return it whenever you feel like. if you return it late, like what's the worst that's gonna happen? You're gonna charge me a nickel? And so it was like kind of like, yeah, that was like the whole thing. I'm like, yeah, it was fine.
Yeah,
just a little stand up bit. I was like, okay, there's nothing that really stood out there, but it fits the episode.
It fit the episode. They mentioned the
talking about libraries. So it cuts to Jerry's apartment, and he's in there with Mr. Bookman. This is the first time we see him. So actually, we're gonna do something different. We're gonna cut, and we're gonna play the scene here with Mr. Bookman, because I don't think us reading it can do it justice.
No, my only notes for this part is Bookman is so good. 3 exclamation points. So yes, we're just going to play it for you. And
like we said, he's very
live commentary, which is us laughing and pissing ourselves. What's going on?
He's Joe Friday. There's almost Jerry's there, but he's almost like can't even react.
No.
Anyways,
and they're trying not to laugh. Both of them are trying to laugh the whole time, so that's good.
Here we go.
Well, I'm glad you're here so we can get this all straightened out. Would you like a cup of tea?
You got any coffee?
Coffee?
Yeah, coffee.
No, I don't drink coffee.
Yeah, you don't drink coffee? How about instant coffee?
No, I don't have.
You don't have any instant coffee?
Well, I don't know.
I have no
Coffee.
coffee.
Instant coffee.
I don't.
You buy a jar of Folgers Crystals, you put it in a cupboard, you forget about it. And later on, when you need it, it's there. It lasts forever. It's freeze-dried. Freeze-dried crystals.
So intense.
Really, I have to remember
just
that.
Like won't let him
talk.
talk.
In 1971.
Yes, and I returned it in 1971.
Yeah, 71. That was my first year on the job. Bad year for libraries. Bad year for America. Hippies burning library cards. Abby Huffman telling everybody to steal books. I don't judge a man by the length of his hair or the kind of music he listens to. Rock was never my bag. But you put on a pair of shoes when you walk into the New York Public Library, fella.
Look, Mr. Bookman.
The finger coming up and all that.
Yeah.
I remember it very specifically.
You're a comedian. You make people laugh.
I try.
You think this is all a big joke, don't you?
Sure.
No, I don't.
I saw you on TV once. I remembered your name from my list. I looked it up. Sure enough,
So he can't say
out.
anything right.
You think because you're a celebrity that somehow the law doesn't apply to you, that you're above the law?
Certainly not.
Well, let me tell you something funny, boy. You know that little stamp? The one that says New York Public Library? Well, that may not mean anything to you, but that means a lot to me. One whole hell of a lot. Sure, go ahead, laugh if you want to. I've seen your type before. Flashy, making the scene, flaunting convention. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. What's this guy making such a big stink about old library books? Well, let me give you a hint, Junior. Maybe we can live without libraries, people like you and me. Maybe. Sure, we're too old to change the world. But what about that kid sitting down, opening a book right now in a branch of the local library and finding drawings of peepees and wee-wees and the cat in the hat and the 5 Chinese brothers? Doesn't he deserve better? Look, if you think this is about overdue fines and missing books, you better think again. This is about that kid's right to read a book without getting his mind warped. Or maybe that turns you on, Seinfeld. Maybe that's how you get your kicks. You and your good time buddies. Well, I got a flash for you, Joy Boy. Party time is over. You got 7 days, Seinfeld. That is 1 week.
Oh, that's great.
So good.
Because he's just like, so he's like, his interaction with Jerry, it's like, you know, you can tell Jerry can barely keep it together. It's more like a monologue. Because the guy will go on and ask like a non sequitur question, really, that doesn't pertain to Jerry, his library book, and then just answering it, inferring that Jerry is at fault.
Yeah.
Like,
There's a few times he almost breaks a few times. It's so good though.
It's like, I know that stamp in the library book doesn't mean a lot to you, but it means a lot to me. A whole hell of a lot. And he's just like, oh man, that's so good. That was like, I couldn't really do it justice. We had to play it. So he leaves, and across the hall, the librarian, she's leaving Kramer's apartment. Luckily, she slams the door quickly and hides from Bookman in Kramer's apartment. She was unnoticed because he was so, he was still talking to Jerry. She could get fired. She's just, she's supposed to be at work at the time, and she can't leave because she's just infatuated with Kramer.
Understandably so.
Yeah.
Out of work, dirty looking.
Yeah. So as Bookman leaves, Jerry's yelling at him that he's like, I'm not, he's not paying. He's like, returned the book in 1971. He's got a witness, Sherry Becker. She wore an orange dress. He's yelling this. She gave me a piece of blackjack gum. I said, licorice gum? What are they going to think of next?
What's the deal with licorice gum?
Yeah. So he decides that he's got to reach out to Sherry and see if she remembers. Like, she can be his witness. So it cuts to Monks and with Sherry. And the joke is that she's not... time didn't do her any favors.
Yeah.
And her voice is in that thick New York accent. It's a low-hanging fruit joke, but it works. It's fine. It's not offensive.
It's not the person he was expecting to be talking to. Yeah.
And it's not like, get a load of this ugly bitch kind of thing. It's like, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, she's a mom. She has a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
And maybe, and especially for the viewer, you're expecting like, she's going to be pretty hot. The way that Jerry described her.
You're expecting like Marissa Tomei.
Yeah, and the chicks that Jerry's dates, they're like, oh, she's going to be... Anyways. So he asks her details about the day at the library. And nothing matches up. Like her story, she wore a purple dress. And it was the Tropic of Capricorn. And she was chewing dentine gum. And then he remembers that he had both books. Tropic of Cancer.
Remember dentine?
Yeah.
Shows her pearly whites from chewing the dentine.
From dentine. And then he had both books. Cancer and Capricorn, and he was going to lend, George the Tropic of Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so it cuts to a flashback of the locker room where Jerry, he's handing George the book, and then he's gonna, George says, "Oh, don't worry, I'll return it the next day." And it's kind of weird dialogue. Sorry, that it's like, here's the book. Don't let anybody see it, and don't let anything happen to it.
I know.
I'm like,
it's so weird.
Like, what the hell? And also, it's like, why couldn't George just take out the book?
Yeah, it's free.
Yeah, I mean, it's a book. Was it like a desired book, or is it like too smutty? Because like, kind of, Sherry was talking about how they were reading like passages from the book to each other.
I don't even know what the book is. We probably should look that up.
Yeah, that's the one thing I didn't do.
We should have done our homework.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy it for you for Christmas.
Yeah.
You watch your mailbox.
So, but as Jerry, remembers everything, it's coming back to him. He leaves Sherry, and he's got to go talk to George. So, it cuts to an evening at the library. It's just Kramer and the librarian. I didn't catch her name.
Marion.
Oh, Marion.
It's like librarian.
But Marion. Okay. So Kramer and Marion are at the library. They're walking around, and she's reading her poems to Kramer, and he really likes them. And then he's like, "Oh, you ought to be published," kind of thing. So it's like they also kind of mention how the library's pretty cool when it's closed and nobody's there, and you could yell, and it's all echoey. So they both just start yelling, "Hello, hello,"
which made me very uncomfortable. Screaming in a library like that, I was like, ugh. It just felt unnatural.
Mm-hmm. So they're yelling, and then Bookman comes out behind them. He says, "Hello." And then they're all both like he's the cops or something.
Yeah.
Because he has that cop attitude.
Yeah.
So I'll do my best Bookman. This is another one, but we'll not play this. But he just goes on. This is another monologue. "I remember when the librarian was a much older woman, kindly, discreet, unattractive. We didn't know anything about her private life. We didn't want to know anything about her private life. She didn't have a private life. While you're thinking about that, think about this. The library closes at 5 o'clock. No exceptions. This is your final warning. Got that, Cupid doll?"
He's just so intense.
Yeah. There's no room for her to say anything. And then he just got that Cupid doll. So I had to look at what Cupid dolls were. So apparently they were just Cupid type dolls in the 1960s based off a comic strip. And I was like, I had to look it up. But you can kind of get it from the context pretty much.
We'll put it in the thumbnail on YouTube.
Yeah. Cupid dolls and Bookman.
Yeah.
So he storms off. He storms off like a cop because he's got his duster after he scolds her. And then it goes back to Jerry's, and Elaine's talking about how her boss wants to see her. So again with the boss thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jerry's off screen. He says, "Maybe you're getting a raise." And she's like, "Maybe I'm getting a wedgie." And then her tells how her boss hated that Columbus biography that she recommended.
Mm-hmm.
Columbus, Euro trash. So, Kramer is, there at the, dining table or whatever. And he's just crying, reading his girlfriend's poetry, because they're so moving. And then he leaves because he's bawling, and he just leaves the notebook there too. Elaine picks it up and thumbs through it, and then George, buzzes up. He says he talked to the homeless guy, and it is, in fact, Heyman, the old gym teacher.
Yeah.
He sat next to the guy, and George proceeds to jog his memory. And then the guy smiles, and then George has got to leave. Like, he's like, I got to get out of here. And as he goes to run away, he's stopped. He's being held back by Heyman. He had George's underwear. And there he was at the library in public, a grown man getting a wedgie.
I haven't gotten a wedgie as a grown man. I have not.
He got a wedgie from homeless Heyman. And Elaine, tries to console him. It's like, well, at least it wasn't atomic. It was. And George pulls out the band that broke from his underwear out of his pocket.
I didn't notice. This was another Ashley being very keen watching it. He wasn't wearing boxers anymore. He's a brief man now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I kind of want to know, when did George start wearing briefs?
Yeah, he's a boxer guy. Which is funny, because I'm like, I'm a boxer brief guy.
Me too.
Like, yeah.
I wear SAXX now. Do you know what? Have you seen SAXX?
No.
There's a little mesh and elastic thing that kind of goes around the sides and just kind of holds everything in place. They're great. Look them up.
I have these Hanes ones that are probably a ripoff of that.
You can buy probably like 5 pairs of Hanes for 1 pair of these SAXX. They're great. They should sponsor us. If you're listening, Mr. SAXX with the double X,
SAXX.
give us a call.
I like that. But so Jerry tells George that he was the one who was supposed to return the book, but he never did. Yeah. And then it's like, what? Flashbacks again to the locker room scene, but it plays the whole thing. So it plays Jerry giving George the book, and then that whole scene, and then it goes to George getting a wedgie. And except this time, I love how they repeated the scream as he's getting wedgied. It's like, ow, ow, ow. Echoing and shit like that as it zooms in on his face. And he dropped the book in the locker room. So he dropped Tropic of Cancer in the book. Dropped the book in the locker room. So that's where it laid. And so it cuts to the library, and Jerry's writing a check to Mr. Bookman. He's like, what did he's like at the end of it, he's like, so what is your problem? What's my problem? Punks like you, that's my problem. And you better not screw up again, Seinfeld, because if you do, I'll be all over you like a pit bull on a poodle. And then he leaves. And then Elaine mentions how it's like, I took your suggestion and gave my boss Marion's poems, the ones that Kramer liked so much. And then he's like, oh, did you like them? No, he didn't. So that was, And then, so that's the Elaine story finished. Yeah. And then George comes in and he's like, he mentions how he was kind of looking, but he didn't see Heyman. He's like, oh, no, he's not there. He must have gone and left. So then it cuts to homeless Heyman, and he's sleeping outside at night, and he's smiling and repeating, can't stand you. Can't stand you.
So creepy.
And he has a Tropic of Cancer book with his pile of shit.
Yeah, he has the book.
Yep. Cuts to a stand-up bit talking about gym day in school was like was weird. It's like Lord of the Flies out there. You're climbing a rope, people are yelling at you, balls are flying everywhere, and then you go cuts, and then you go to science class, literature, history, whatever. It's like, what a weird day. So, yeah. And I'm trying to think of like my gym class. I was never really good at sports, but I never really minded gym class. It was fine.
I enjoyed gym.
Yeah. I think no one really cared. Like if you sucked at a sport or whatever, they're kind of just like, all right, here you go. And it's like, you're doing soccer. And some people loved the shit out of soccer. And they were like, took it so seriously. I'm like, God damn, it's balls. You kick it like you're trying to take my head off.
Yeah. And
then
I was in karate, and there's one older kid. He's like 2 years older, which was a big difference back then. And I was always a small kid. And like when you did practice punches and stuff and did the blocks, he would hurt my arm blocking me. I'm like, what are we doing here? Just coming down and just smacking me with this forearm. And I was like, why are we getting so rough? We're supposed to be kids playing, having fun.
Yeah. Relax. Yeah. So it was, I never really minded gym class. But anyways, so it was a great episode. But like I said many times throughout this, I think Elaine's contribution was weak as fuck.
Yeah.
It had nothing
I like how
to
they
do-
tied it in that she was struggling at work. She needed a book. Kramer's girlfriend had poems. They tied it in okay, but it still wasn't the strongest part of the episode. And she's such a strong character to have such a weak episode.
Yeah. You could have put this in any other episode.
Mm-hmm.
Only the fact that the poems at the very end that was it.
So do you read poems?
No.
Never. I never sat there and read poems. Oh, except for when you're forced to in school.
Yep,
but
that was
music
I think that's poetry.
That applies.
Like I'll like reading lyrics and going back and like if I, I think with school enforcing writing poetry and reading poetry and stuff like that really put a bad taste in my mouth. And then once I started liking music and writing music, I'm like, oh, these are poetry. This is poetry put to music.
It was poetry you want to do as opposed to poetry you're forced to do.
Yeah. And then I have my own style and what I like to get out of it for me. And not that it's unique, but I am definitely like regimented to where I'm like, it has to rhyme. These lines, they have to rhyme. Because I know there's songs that they don't, and there's no rules in music and even in poetry and stuff like that. But I'm like, it feels like it's just talking if it's not rhyming.
That's true. You're like Henry Rollins.
Yeah.
If you want to hear some Brian's poetry, check out Playing Without a Pilot.
Yes.
And his new band, Just In Case, just dropped a new single last week.
Yes, we did.
And we are late this week because I was hit with a hurricane and Brian had a hurricane of gigs last week.
Yeah. I like that. That's a good segue.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, I think we're kind of done here. So great episode. Despite Elaine's parts being kind of like, bom, 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 bom. I still thought it was awesome. I think Bookman was a great. I think Bookman was a great character, great contribution to this. And it kind of sucks that he was a one-off character.
He was so good. Like, yeah.
But it's also like maybe he gave it all for that one performance. If you bring him up again, it's like, what is he going to do?
Yeah, that's true. You couldn't keep that same line going. So, yeah.
Yeah.
He's definitely one of the most memorable one-off characters.
One-time characters, yeah. I think he's up there with Soup Nazi for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of one-off, we have a link down below. One link to bring you to all our socials. A Linktree link.
I like it.
One-off link. So click on that. You can find us on Instagram, on Twitter. You can find our YouTube, our Spotify link, I think is in there. Anyway, I color coordinate. I match the colors perfectly to our logo. It's pretty.
Pretty awesome. Real nice stuff over there. All right. I think we're bringing this in for a landing. Let's get out of here. Thanks for tuning in. Follow us on all those social media deals. Subscribe on YouTube, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Goodbye now.